65 degrees Fahrenheit today, which would be about 17 C or so in the middle of the winter. Our normal highs today would be about 45. So I'm going to be outside a little bit later today, that's for sure, and take advantage, work around the farm outdoors because it's beautiful. So I hope it's nice wherever you're at. I'm sure because people are all over the world. Last week we had crazy weather, snow in Portugal, snow on the beaches in Spain, which are where palm trees are. So, and then William was saying, I know he had a real cold spell, but
yeah,
anyway, I'm going to turn it over to William. All yours, man. I'm going to turn my webcam off so that I don't divert. And please put questions in that question area. William usually takes a break in the middle. He'll tell you when he wants to answer them. We'll make sure, Mark and I will make sure he gets them. And he is always willing to answer anything and everything that you guys have. So let's get going.
Okay, so I'll have the questions open actually here. So if somebody asks something and I see what's happening, you know, maybe I can answer as I go. Okay, so if everybody can see this, I'll just start.
Throw in some ones so everybody can see the full screen of William's screen where it says reading the landscape. Yep, we're getting some ones. Daniel. Yep, yeah, everybody, it's coming up. So they see it. Your go, William. You're good.
Okay, so this is a complex subject, so I'll split this into two, and we'll, for the second part, we'll have soil and vegetation. You'll see from the outline. Just give me a second. Something is okay. No. Okay, so again, if you go to this page, you'll see the resources. I didn't put for today, but because this is two-part, I'll put the next time. I'll put the resources. There will be probably some useful links to books and websites and stuff. Okay, so we are here in the process. We are, reading the landscape. We are in the design phase, and we went through the, research context and finding appropriate land. Last time we prepared a base map, and I said that, developing a base map is a starting point for a permaculture design. That's a foundation that you create your design, but also that base map has a contour map, and we'll be using that today. Overall, we do a base map by combining the aerial or satellite photo and a topographic map into something that you can see on the right, base map, and that's what we were aiming for last time, because that can tell us a lot about the terrain and everything else that we have. You can put everything that you can see from satellite. On this image you can see the houses and everything, the roads. So that's the base map. And we went through the three ways that we can do a base map, and I showed you the easiest one, the Google Earth and Google Maps. Then using a graphic design software, and finally survey of the site, a little bit more complex. But the point is, we need a base map, especially for reading the landscape, because as you're reading the landscape, you can put everything that you can see by your eyes, and everything that you can interpret from the map, you'll see actually from the base map. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the landscape, and we're going to go through all these 9. Maybe I'll add some more, but I know it's the landscape, but I'm also including the weather pattern, because the weather pattern and the climate have, they have a huge impact onto the landscape. So I'm also including that, but also because I like in this phase, in the phase of reading the landscape, create some interpretations, and those interpretations are, you'll see once we go to the first major 6, we then go into interpretation mode, where we are trying to find different microclimates, different land systems. You're going to see what's that next time, but also sectors. And for the sector map, we need to to be aware of the energies that are coming outside the site, and outside the site means the weather pattern mostly. So I did include the weather pattern here as well, and as I said, we're going to look at the whole picture. So the basic input of solar energy and water comes from the weather. Actually, it comes from the climate. So the climate, weather, actually the sun, then the climate, and the weather as an expression of difference between the energy that the sun is giving to the earth. So we're going to consider weather patterns, sun, wind, and precipitation, and also the landscape features as I defined them last time. That would be geographic features, or you can call that topography. Then geology, type of the soil, and biome. And this image actually encompasses everything that I'll be talking and their interaction. Lost my mouse. All right. So, as I said, you're looking at the whole picture, and when you are looking at the picture, you can see that all the visible features of an area of a land, that's the landscape. It includes the physical elements like the mountains, hills, water bodies, rivers, lakes, ponds, sea, but it also includes the living elements of land covering, including vegetation. So you could say that the landscape is a group of different ecosystems, each interacting with the atmosphere, earth, and biota. But we'll look also at what's above the ground. Look at the weather. So I would say that then the landscape we see is actually formed by interaction of 4 factors, and that's the climate, that's the rock, soil, and the living things. And the living things, of course, we need to include humans, because humans are the keystone species. The species is actually influencing everything on this earth. So if there are no humans, then the landscape would be looking totally different. And even this image that you're looking right now would be all woodland. But because of the human activity, we have pastures and succession in different phases. So we need also to include the humans. And when we are going to analyze the landscape, we are going to look at the components, but rather than how scientists would do thinking in terms of how those things are not connected. We are going to see the components, but we're going to see how they interact as well in the second part of the webinar. So each landscape is a system. It's a whole system composed of different elements, and those elements are, you could say, geomorphical. And as you can see on the image on the top left, that would include topography, ridges and gullies and saddles, valleys and bedrock and everything, but also environmental. That means water and vegetation and animals. Then climate, as I said, wind and frost and fog and humidity and everything. But also, as I said, we need to include humans with their houses, roads, walls, and fences. But in this presentation, I won't be focusing that much on human elements, rather at just so here's the landscape, here's the site, rather interpreting nature. I think that we can easily interpret the human infrastructure that is built on that landscape. So I'll be focusing on mainly those 3. And in reading the landscape, we're going to use different, let's say, methodologies, and those are observation. Observation would mean just observing and not actually doing active, surveys. On the other side, you have survey where you are actively involved into investigating, different components of the site. And we are also going to use some tools, web tools, for doing observation of the weather patterns as well. So, there are, even I didn't put in this presentation, but there are different apps that people, maybe I can do that next time, that you use in your observation, in your surveys, but this is the methodology that we'll be using. Okay, so the first one is are the weather patterns, and here, weather is a complex thing, influences everything, but we categorize weather to a degree that we say it's hot or cold, wet or dry, calm or stormy, clear or cloudy, but all weather actually exists because of the sun and, of course, the unique position of Earth, in space. But weather is driven by the air pressure, temperature, and moisture differences between one place and another. And as I said, those differences exist because of the sun, to be exact, of the sun's angle at any particular spot, which varies then, of course, from the tropics to the more polar regions. And that's why we have the weather, that's why we have the water cycle. So I would say that understanding sun is, understanding how sun behaves is the first step we need to be aware of in our observation of landscape. The sun is the main influence on climate, climate or weather over time is climate, and weather is, when we say weather, we mean like current or next few days. So I would say that the first step that anybody should be aware of on their site and in reading the landscape is the sun position, the solar axis, and that means how many hours of sun is your site getting, how this is changing throughout the year, what are the sun shade patterns and solar elevation angle, as I said, throughout the year. And to find this, you can use, I found this is actually an image from a website that I used in my design and in my reading the landscape, that you can put your location and then the date, and then you'll see like exactly on the map how the sun behaves, what's the elevation and what's the solar elevation angle, and what are the different paths of the sun on your site. And I won't go on the website, but you can use the sun calc if you need. But there is also smartphone apps, and there is one called Sun Seeker. Then you can use while you're on your site to turn your smartphone over the landscape, and then you can see exactly where the sun will go or is going, where the sun path is. That's pretty useful when you're on the site and you are trying to decide where to position. Is this a good place for the garden? How is the sun behaving in winter, in spring, and in summer? So those two tools are great for understanding how the sun behaves, because, as I said, the sun is the primary source of energy on the site, and you just simply need to understand how the sun, what's the sun pattern. Then next is understanding how the wind behaves, and what kind of winds are coming from which direction, when they are happening, what type of winds are dominant throughout the season, what types are blowing and from where, and also understanding how rain comes, where does the rain come from, and what are the weather patterns. And I can show you here. I'll just show you the website that I'm talking about. Okay, so if people can see this, tell me if you can. Okay, so this is the website I was talking when you're trying to understand the weather patterns. So here you can, you can change between wind and clouds and temperature. So basically, let's say that you are on your site, you want to see how the weather patterns are behaving, even for a few days, but 2 days in advance. But I would say most importantly, how are they currently behaving. So you can connect that with what's happening on your site. So you can see here on this image that wind is coming from the south. So if you're on your site, you can then see what's the general weather pattern that is bringing that wind. But then you can also switch, what are the clouds, how the clouds are looking, and the pressure also. So we understand instantaneously what's happening with your weather. So this is a great website that I've been using just for a daily observation, of my weather. All right, so let's see. So that's what I'm trying to convey here is, when you're looking at landscape, the first thing is, understanding the weather pattern. So when you're looking at the image like this, okay, so obviously it's a clear day, but let's say, that the wind is blowing from the east, and you then understand what that wind means. You understand that maybe that wind is going to bring rain. So you start to understand that already what is the landscape, why is the landscape shaped like it is, and what's actually happening with the basic input of energy that's coming from the sun. And here I would, most importantly, what you would need to be aware of is, the extreme weather events. That means, what's happening during the heavy rain and thunderstorm, and what's happening during drought, during the flood, and during the fire. Not exactly going out when it's the fire, but understanding, what does the extreme weather look like. That's going to be especially important because for your design and your setup to understand these patterns. So one is understanding daily patterns, and one is understanding patterns that are extremely the extreme weather patterns that are happening also. All right, so next we'll be looking at terrain. Let me see if there are any questions. I can't see. I don't know. Okay, I'll just move. I'll see later the questions. Okay, chat. All right, I'll just move. Okay, so the next is terrain, and that's why I said that your base map is important, because we'll be looking at your base map to understand your terrain. First looking at the map, and then looking at your site. So when you're looking at this map, you want to be able to understand what the contour lines on this map. The contour lines are marked in green, and those simply means those lines are elevation lines. And elevation can be marked, in 5, 10, 20 meters. We talked last time about it. And you wanna from these contour lines, you wanna be able to analyze what your terrain is telling you. And I'm going to explain you 6 main features that you can see from a map like this. And the first one will be seeing the steep slope, understanding how the steep slope is marked on the map. And you see here it's marked with red. The closer the contour lines are, the steeper the slope. So this is that's the first thing that you can clearly see from a topographic map. Then, of course, the hill is marked contour lines forming concentric circles, and that's easy to recognize. Then from the hilltop, the ground slopes in all directions, and you can see that with the numbers that are marked on the map. Then one of the prominent features is also a saddle, and the saddle would be a deep or low point between two areas of high ground. On the map, on the topographic map, it's marked with an hourglass appearance. So that would be the saddle. The next one would be the ridge, and the ridge is the highest point in the landscape. The landform is divided. If you have hilly, or mountainous landscape, then that landform or that landscape is divided into ridges and valleys. The ridges are the highest point, the valleys are the areas in between, and the contour lines that are forming a ridge, they tend to be U or V shaped, and the closed end of the contour line points away from high ground. And for the valley is also U or V shaped, but the closed end of the contour line points toward high ground. And I'm going to show you, once you're in the field, this will make more sense. But it's critical to understand the topographic map, because that you can see what's happening on the map, what's the map showing you, and then connect that with what's actually happening on the site. And then we have a depression that has a contour lines that have tick marks pointing toward low ground. That would be completely similar to hill. But the contour lines would be actually, decreasing, as you go inwards, and that usually marks, a sinkhole, a hole in the ground, depending on how deep it is. So once again, let's say, just looking at this is just a map of my property, the base map, and I marked here, certain features. So they're not as distinct as you would, like on a topographic map, but you can see clearly that there is a depression here, and I mark it. And then there is sort of valley on the top of the map, and then obviously there is a prominent ridge on the right. So that's what I'm saying. That's the level of what you need or what you want to understand from the map, because then later on you go out. And this is another map, and I found this from Darren Doherty, and here he marked the valleys in blue and the ridges in pink, and he just connected he just connected different valleys and different ridges. That's then critical for later when you're designing, let's say, key point dams and other features, putting where you're going to design your irrigation pipes and everything. So you want to first study your topographic map, confirm that it's going on the site itself, and based on that you can design and set up, because then you can say, okay, now I have a pretty good understanding of what's my terrain telling me. Okay, so I would say that looking at this image, the first thing that once you're on a site, you just need to make distinction. So is my landscape, is it part of the plains? Is it kind of the plains? Am I in the plains but mountains are on both sides? Is my landscape full of hills, or is that some kind of tablelands? So that's kind of the first distinction when you're looking at your landscape. So you can clearly, like I mark ridge, so when you're looking, okay, so you can say, okay, this is a valley, this is a ridge, this is a valley, this is a ridge. So you have understanding of how the terrain looks like. And the second thing I would be looking at is how the slopes are behaving, how steep they are. Are there gentle slopes and steep slopes? That's just a general understanding of geomorphology of the terrain. And then also I would be looking at where are my slopes facing? West facing slopes, south facing slopes, and east facing. Where are they? How are they positioned in an aspect to the sun? So those three things. So when you're look at where are the ridges, where are the valleys, where are the steep slopes, where are the gentle slopes, and west facing, south facing, east facing slopes. So I understand how is your terrain oriented also in space. All right. So the next would be rocks. So the rocks are the basis for everything, because once you understand rocks, you can understand hydrology, geology, and pedology and everything. And ultimately, it's the nature of the rock that has then effect on the soil, that has then effect on the vegetation. So essentially, by understanding rocks, you can kind of make an educated guess what kind of vegetation you'll have. Once you know also in which climate you're in. So that's why I'm emphasizing the weather and climate as well in understanding the landscape. So I'm going to I'm a geologist, so I could say that I'm biased in my love for geology, but I would say that you have to understand that the landscape that you have today is a result primarily of the tectonic forces that are shaping or shape that landscape. So you have primary tectonic activity, and then you have your ridges and valleys and everything, and then by erosion is doing its work and slowly eroding and changing that landscape. But the difference is difference between Australia, which is a very stable continent, and let's say Rocky Mountains, is in that tectonic forces that were shaping or are shaping the landscape. And geology is important because it gives us the understanding of rocks, and rocks are the spine of the landscape. If you want to understand your landscape, it's not necessary that you need to, but it's good to understand what type of rocks are underneath. And essentially, I won't give you academic lecture here, but I would say that there are three types of rocks that are constantly recycled, very slowly, but they are. So although they are hidden from outside most of the time, they have a huge effect on landscape. But for you, what I would say, you don't have to be a geologist. You just need to know that the rocks are expressing, having influence on landscape in three main ways. And the first one is that the harder rocks will make hills, and the softer rocks will make valleys. And this is the direct consequences of the geological force that I was saying, and the weathering. And we generally find the softer rocks in the fault lines where the rock gets crumbled and then transported by water, and then it forms a valley. So the valley ridge topography is exaggerated by the erosion force and the fault lines. And some rocks will hold water, some will not, or the water will behave totally different. And for example, if you have your limestone as a bedrock, you'll have underground rivers, and you'll have water behaving rather interestingly than let's say if you have if you have granite rock or something. And then it itself has a huge influence on the landscape, because then you have your sinkholes, you have rock falls, everything. The landscape is totally different, exaggerated by the climate than you're in. And the third most important way it's expressed is that some rocks will make soil that is poor in nutrients, but some will make soil that is rich. So, for example, the volcanic rocks are very rich in nutrients, and most of the Australian ancient highly weathered rocks are not. So that's why I say that in understanding rocks, you will have a good idea of what you can actually expect when it comes to your vegetation and your soil and your vegetation. All right, so I'll do this and then we'll stop for a second. I would say that when you're looking at, when you're trying to understand your landscape from a geology perspective, I would say that the best thing would be to find rocky outcrops. And here I'm pointing out some ideas for finding rocky outcrops, and you can actually on the right, the arrow on the right is pointing towards the rocky outcrop. And what I would do, I would go to these places, find rocky outcrops, and also there is a telltale signs of what rocks are in the landscape. If you look at what type of buildings are there, what are people building, and what materials they are using. And as you can see, this fence, this rocky fence is probably done from the rock, from the rock that is underlaying the landscape. So that's you don't, even if you don't have rocky outcrops, you'll still have some idea by finding this type of signs. So that's what I would do in this kind of landscape. I would just walk, and I would look at where are my rocky outcrops. I would go to the rocky outcrop, and then I would take that rock, and I wouldn't even me as a geologist, if I came to this kind of landscape and even if I took a rock, probably I wouldn't know what kind of rock it is, because rocks are complex, and there can be all kind of things. And I would have an idea, maybe okay, so this is sedimentary, this is metamorphic, or this is igneous rock. But most likely that rock would be totally probably changed into something different. And I would be only concerned by is this are these rock crumbly, are these rock poor, or not having enough nutrients, or is this limestone, or is something else that is telling me probably how my water will be behaving underground. So that's what I'm trying to convey here. The message here is that probably you'll have soil over your rock, but as you can see in this type of map here, that you'll probably have rocky outcrops that you can find and then analyze and see what's happening. All right, so I might take some questions. I can't find my.
Are you not seeing it there, William? I can tell you what you've had some. Was it windytv.com that you used for the weather? Is that correct? Because that's what we said. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So this is the website. It's Windy TV, and actually, I think it works on the engine of Earth Now. I think it's called. But this gives you actually, you can see the pressure, you can see the clouds, you can see basically everything. Currently, what's happening currently, and pressure, rain, and even waves and everything. So it's Windy TV.
Cool. All right, and then another question is, you talked about a Sunseeker app. Did you give the name for that?
It's Sunseeker, when a Sunseeker app for the smartphone, and it's SunCalc for the on the website. Okay, so you go on the Sun, okay, and you can see here if you're seeing my screen, you can put in your location, and then based on the date you want, okay, the date is now, you can see exactly, you know, if you zoom in, you can see exactly, let's say that this is your address, you can see then exactly how the sun is actually behaving. You know, what's the sun path.
Awesome. Yeah, that was the question. Guys, throw us some other questions in. Mike says that the graphic of the limestone is awesome. By the way, I don't know why. Your screen, and maybe it's just my computer today, your graphics have just really great clarity. I don't know, they're really looking good. So, any other questions, you guys, before William keeps moving on? Don't be shy. Takes them a second to type, so.
I don't have much. I have, let's say, water, and then, you know, I'll stick with the water a little bit. But basically that's it, and, you know, maybe more questions. And in the next webinar, I'll have actually interpreting all, because this is all kind of, we are taking a look at just different components, but then in the next webinar we'll be looking how they're interacting, and, you know, what the ecosystems are telling us, you know, how the ecosystems are expressed and everything. So
you do have here's a couple more questions. One from Frank Sakshi. You recommend tools like Solar Pathfinder.
Solar Pathfinder, okay. Do
you know that one?
No.
Is that one? Well, I think the one he just told you guys about, Solar Calc, or Sun Calc, excuse me, is one that does the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then here's a great question from Brian. Will the rock affect the soil and then affect the type of plants that will work or that will grow? I think he said.
Of course. You know, the first you have the rocks, and everything in the beginning was rocks, and then you had, you know, your weather, your climate, and then the moisture, and then, you know, as the ecological succession goes, you first have, you know, tiny, you know, microscopic organisms which actually, you know, eat the rock and create soil, and then so ultimately the soil is the expression of the rock, and the vegetation is the expression of the soil. So you can actually track that back to the rock. But also the climate, the biggest influence on vegetation on, you know, microscopic scale is the climate. Okay, so if you don't have any rain, you won't have any trees. You'll have a desert. If you have a lot of rain, you know, you'll have a rainforest, for example, if that is in tropical. So ultimately, climate is the most important factor. It's, you know, influencing the weather patterns and the rocks and how the rocks are being processed. But then you have slight modification of that climate by the type of the rock and by the type of how the terrain is shaped. What are the aspects? So rocks have, because let's say, for example, in Croatia, we have limestone on our coast and we have limestone in our mountains, and you have totally different vegetation because on the coast it's Mediterranean climate, which means that there is no much rain during the summer. So you have totally different vegetation than in the mountains that has a lot of rain. So totally different vegetation would be growing on the same type of rock because of the climate. But if you have the same climate and different type of rocks, you'll have a slightly different vegetation because of that change in the rock material, parent rock material.
Just real quickly, William, some of you guys have come to some of my presentations, and if you're members of Eat Elite, you can get the replays of this, but go back to the ecological aquaculture course that I did, and I live in a valley where the climate is similar on both sides in the valley, but the rock is completely different. It is granitic, metamorphic on one side of the valley and it's sedimentary on the other, and the vegetation is dramatically different between those two sides because of the rock difference, and it's right in the same climatic and geographic.
So that's what I'm saying. If the climate is the same, then the rock will have, the rock and distribution of the moisture, certain microclimates is then influencing the type of vegetation.
So Frank clarified his question, William, about what he was calling solar pathfinder. He said, do you know of anything that will determine annual exposure to the sun? And I don't know if that means how many days of sunshine. I mean, there are stats of that everywhere you go, but I don't know if there's a micro tool or device that will help with that.
No. I wouldn't know that.
Yeah, doesn't sound like it, Frank. Maybe you can find one for us, buddy, and then share it with us. That'd be great. Well, William, that was all I've got for questions right now. Why don't you keep moving, and then you guys think about more questions. There's a lot of you out there, and so when William's done, he'll answer some more. So,
all right, I'll just go. All right, so we'll just move to the water, and water is extremely important, and I'll be focusing. I'll be talking about water, and basically that's it for today. And as I said, the water is the environmental factor, and that and we have water because of our climate and because of our weather. So water is the big landscape component because its force is shaping the environment, and this is another bit of a picture of Plitvice lakes in Croatia, and this is the limestone, and the exactly same limestone on the coast would be totally barren with different vegetation, but here there is a lot of precipitation throughout the year, and because the limestone is soluble rock, chemically soluble rock, you have all these, maybe you've seen, maybe you didn't, but all these different river paths and everything. So the water is a force to be reckoned with, and for us, what it means that is we need to be aware of where the water is coming from, where does it where is it held, and then where does it go. And again, I showed you different, for the sun, for the climate and the weather. It's the kind of the sun. Sun has its own, let's say, sun is forcing its cycle with with everything. So we have thanks to our sun, we have the water cycle, and what I would like you to be aware of here, we are going to focus on three main components in this lesson. Is that's the precipitation you get, how does the surface runoff behave, so look like, and I'm going to talk about the groundwater as well. And I would say the first thing in understanding your water cycle, how water actually behaves and everything, is the thing that I said that influences how the climate, how the vegetation is expressed due to climate, and that's the average annual rainfall, and that's measured in millimeters, and that will give you an idea how much water you're getting. As I said, no water means desert, a lot of water means rainforest. So it is the availability of water that is actually also controlling, in combination with rocks, with types of rocks and geography, that is controlling the ecosystems and the vegetation. So I say the first thing you need to understand is what is your average annual rainfall, and this is important because then, based with that data, and once you know where your site is located in the watershed, you'll have some idea, of how much water is actually coming through your site. I won't go actually in detail in how to find, how to actually look where your watershed is, how to define its boundaries. But I'm going to say that each piece of land actually belongs to a watershed, and watershed, if you don't know what watershed is, that's an area of a land that actually drains runoff from rain or snow downhill from the highest geographical point, and those boundaries of watersheds are hills and ridges and mountains, and that then you have rainwater that's actually rainfall that's dropping onto the landscape. The water under influence of gravity goes down, and it's totally different where your house is located. You need to be aware of where your site is located within that watershed, because if you're high in the watershed, you'll have a small flow of water. If you're low in the watershed, you'll have lots of water coming to your site. So I would say the first is what's your annual precipitation, what's your annual average rainfall, and then where is your site located in the watershed. As I'm going to go into the water part of the design, I'll be actually explaining how to find where your watershed boundaries are, and I'll show an example. This is just for you to understand that wherever you are, even if you're in a flat land, you are part of a watershed, and that watershed can be huge or small, but that depends on how much water is going to flow. So as you're going to see from this image, let's say that your house is on the top of that hill. If it's on the top of that hill, then you don't have any watershed, because all the rain that falls on that ridge actually goes in all direction down, leaving you without anything. So your watershed can be there only your roof, can be your water collection area. But if your house is down in the valley, like it's it's here on the image, then everything that is above the ground, everything that is actually going up the mountain, and who knows, this actually house in this valley probably has a huge watershed, and that watershed can be maybe running for 100 kilometers up the hill, through these valleys in between the ridges. And this basically, if you have a house here, then as I told you, that you should be, let's say for example, observing extreme weather events, then you can see probably that a 100-year flood would actually flood the whole valley because of how much water is collected in the watershed and then channeled through this valley. So in that occasion, probably it would be better to have a house on top of the hill, but then you wouldn't have any watershed. So you'll see later in infrastructure, when we'll be talking about the infrastructure, that the best location for the house is actually halfway up the hill. You have safety from flood, but you also have some kind of watershed above you. Okay, so when we are talking, okay, so we went through the precipitation, went through the watershed, and then let's now talk about the groundwater. And the groundwater occurs in rocks underneath. So we have different rock types. For each different rock type, there is a slightly different how the water will be, how the groundwater will behave. So let's say if you have well sorted sand, the water will be, totally different. The water table will be totally different than, let's say, in limestones, because in the limestones you have all these cairns and hallways and whatever, and the water is behaving totally different. Let's say in the granite is mostly focused, it's mostly accumulated in the fractures in the faults. So it behaves totally different in three types of rocks. That's why I say that once you understand what types of rocks you have, you'll have a better understanding of how your groundwater behaves, what type of soil you'll have, and eventually what type of vegetation. So as you can see, let's say on the lower right image, that would be some kind of you have you have your water bearing, water holding layer in between these two impervious rocks, and that would be, let's say, you can imagine that's some kind of granite or some kind of fault. So that would be kind of your underground groundwater, and how your groundwater would be quite different than, let's say, for example, on the lower left image, where you have like a water table, and let's say you can imagine that's some kind of gravel. So here's how to think about it. So when you have rain, so the rain will fall on the ground, okay? So, and after after the requirements of plants and soil are satisfied, for example, if it was a really dry period, then first the soil and the plants will drink a lot of water, and then any excess water actually will infiltrate below to the water table. Okay, so, and below the water table, actually all the openings in the rocks are full of water. Okay, and then that water moves to the aquifer, to the streams or lakes, or if you have well, then to the well. But there is a zone between the land surface and the groundwater and the aquifer that's actually we call unsaturated zone. And that unsaturated zone, there is usually not there is water, but maybe some pores, but not much. Mostly it's it's air if it's healthy soil. And after then that's why you can see that sometimes your soil is waterlogged. For example, if there is a lot of rain and the raindrops, then that unsaturated zone also becomes a saturated zone as your water table is actually rising up. It comes close to the land surface. So that's what's happening. You have a significant zone. All the plants all the soil is actually have drank up all the water it needs. It percolates down to the water table, but as it keeps on falling, then the water table is just rising into the unsaturated zone as well, and that's why you don't have waterlogged soil. And when you're looking at your landscape, we actually can't tell where exactly where the groundwater is exactly, unless we drill a well and look for the occurrences in the landscape itself. So what's happening here is okay. So I would say that once you're on the site looking for water, you should be looking at occurrences, and those occurrences can be small. Well, it's not small, but seeps. Okay, seeps would be something. They would tell us something about the groundwater. So that's a seep is a place where that's a moist or wet place where water and it's usually underground water reaches the Earth's surface from the underground aquifer. And the seep is not a spring, because a seep usually refers to something that has not enough flow to occur as a spring. Okay, so that would be the first. That would be the first sign of okay, so this is water is occurring here. That's something telling me about type of rocks I have, and where the fractures in the rocks are, or something. So that would be the first step. The second one would be, of course, that's obvious, finding a spring. And there are different types of springs that, usually the smallest one are the fracture springs that, discharge from faults, joints, or, different types of, holes in the earth. They are just, that's water under pressure that is actually following some cracks and finding points of weakness in the rock and actually coming out. But from the other side, you can have, let's say, something that's called tubular springs, where water flows from underground caverns, and that can be, extremely, that spring can be extremely, let's say, big in water terms, how much water it can discharge. So it's, if it's a big flow coming from underground, that's, I would say that, it's probably limestone rock. If it's a smaller, seep or a smaller spring, I would say it's kind of probably some kind of granite or different kind of different kind of metamorphic rock that have cracks. And I would say that the easiest way to spot a small spring is by a strip of grass that is brighter green than the surroundings, and it's stretching from the point where the spring is coming out, and and where is it flowing. And in summer is usually greener because the grass is continuously moist, but in winter it's also greener because the underground water is a little bit warmer than a cold winter, the snow and everything, and the grass can grow although it's cold. And so those would be those two things. But I would also encourage you to look at the lakes, the ponds and lakes. Okay, so the ponds are usually, you could say the ponds are usually man-made structures, but they don't have to be, because if a pond is dug out and it's actually continuously, let's say full, or a little bit varying with the weather cycles, then there is a possibility that that pond has a gravel, it's not gravel bedrock, but gravel in the underground, and then that's the feeding, and the water table is close to the ground, so that's why that pond is full. But you can see that obviously from the shape. But the lower right image is actually a pond or a lake in a gravel pit, and gravel pit is nearby the river, and because the river banks and the whole river plain is full of gravel, then the underground actually water from the river reaches here, and you have that water table. So with simply by understanding understanding rocks, understanding how, of course, I'm a geologist, I'm a hydrogeologist by trade, so I'm trained to see these things, but they're just a more like a testimony to finding, even if you're going to college or university or something, finding a trade that can help you in living your let's say permaculture dream, because geology is now helping me understand rocks and understand hydrogeology, and I neglected for a long time. I neglected biology, but now I'm into biology and of course into the weather as well. So it's a whole, it's a holistic science, you can say. It's permaculture, and each of the subjects that I was talking, you can actually explore for the rest of your lives. But that's why I'm saying here, you actually don't need to understand, let's say, in details everything, or rather just what that means for you, what that means in what are the consequences of those rocks in terms of what you want to do, and how is that influencing your site and what you want to do. So the next thing you want to, when you on a site, so first we look at what are the sources of water. The next thing would be how is the water flowing? So are there how is that water passing through the site? You have like a small brooks or creeks or river, and I said that is going to be the function of your watershed. So that's why I said it's extremely important to understand where you are located in the watershed. So we have something that I didn't know, but we have small brooks. That would be something that's really really small but still flowing, and then some kind of creeks, streams, and then rivers, and that's also the hydrology of that is also important to understand, because you'll see in the next step this is the force that is actually shaping your site. Okay, and okay, so finally I would say that it's also, so we've seen, so where is the water coming from, where is the sources of water, how is that water flowing. But here I would also encourage you to study the water drainage pattern, okay, of the site. So so when you have rain, where is that water, how is that water actually behaving? Is it flowing quickly and causing erosion, or it actually flows slowly and stagnates and actually forms bogs, waterlogged soil, or is it forming some kind of lakes, how it's flooded, and you can look for those signs. Those are the kind of, okay, so the water is not flowing anymore, so it's already caused something, and you're kind of being a detective and seeing what that water has actually done, what's the erosion consequence, what's the pattern of that drainage. So as you can see on the top right image, this is when I was trying to find an image for erosion. I found this one. This is, I think, from Madagascar or somewhere. They have huge erosion due to deforestation. And as you can see, okay, so they have huge numbers of rain, and once there is no vegetation, once you have erosion happening, then it just keeps on, being bigger and bigger. And that's what I'm saying. Once you're on the site, when you have to look at those erosion channels, and then you'll know what the history of the site actually is, in a sense that, okay, so maybe this site is flooding heavily. Maybe there is no signs of any flood. This area is boggy, this area is dry. So all that is kind of being a part of study of your site. Okay, and we'll talk next time. We'll talk about the soil and vegetation and microclimates and sectors and different ecosystem land systems. But this is for this time, for this session. This is basically it. And I'm happy to answer your questions if there are any.
Yeah, there are. One, again, you may not remember this, but back in one of your earlier, I think it was the image right after you started, Robert asked, what's the name of the river that's in the image? Did you know that? It was the really beautiful one with all the ponds and riverways and a very deep canyon-y sort of picture.
Oh, that's on the Plitvice Lakes. I think that he was talking about that one. Let me see what he was talking about. Is that this one?
That's the one, I believe. We'll see if he can. He's usually really good about getting back. I believe this is that. It's that one, yeah.
I don't know which what river exactly is this, because there are many rivers in there, canyons and everything, and lakes. It's called Plitvice Lakes, so probably all those lakes are accumulated into river that actually flows from there. I'm not sure what exactly the river name is.
He says that, yes, that was the image. So that's
probably it's Dobra. I think it's Dobra. Mm-hmm.
And then Frank clarified that he actually was, when he was saying Solar Pathfinder, that actually is a program. However, he says it's pretty pricey. And he had said before that what it does is gives amounts of, certain different, how to determine placement for solar panels, greenhouses, gardens, and so on.
Yeah.
Then he says, maybe we can buy one and share it amongst ourselves. That's one of the wonderful things that we hope you can do through this community, everybody, is go into the Eat Free or Elite Eat Facebook pages or write on comments on the webpage, ask for those kinds of things and describe tools you might have yourself that you might be able to loan to others, and all that. That could be really helpful. And then Mary asked, and I think you answered this one, but you can get you can get Sun. I thought it was a question, but she says you can get SunCalc for the Android, not just for the computer. So I guess that looks like a comment from her, from Mary Lee.
Good.
Yeah. And then here's a question: can the natural minerals found in groundwater have a beneficial or negative effect on vegetation after being filtered through different types of stone, rock, etc.? That comes from Keith.
Well, I would say that depends, of course, it all depends on what type of rocks you have, because some rocks are not soluble in water, okay? So, and then if they're not soluble in water, that means that water is then just eroding the rocks and, you know, taking those little bit tiny minerals and then depositing that somewhere. So, okay, so if that's happening, then obviously the deposit is now in the form of, you know, riverbed or sand or something, and then, you know, you have vegetation growing on that. So obviously vegetation would be benefiting if the rocks is, let's say, if the rocks was all volcanic and full of phosphorus or something. For example, the limestone rock is soluble in water, and but the water then is the water is clear, okay, because there are no small little, you know, gravels. So water is always clear, but it's not as rich in minerals as it probably would be if the, you know, underlying rock is some kind of volcanic rock that's then transported. So it all depends on what type of rock we're talking about. If the rock is actually rich, then, you know, of course the vegetation will benefit. Maybe, you know, maybe at that point or maybe downstream where that, you know, little crumbly rocks get deposited.
Super. By the way, I'm curious, this is my question. I live in an area where both our groundwater and our surface water, because of groundwater being the source, are really affected by our sandstone vegetation. And historically, it's been stated that you don't typically find nitrogen that has been stored in the rock. However, in my little area, we've actually found that there are deposits of rock where there is nitrogen in the rock. So if you crush that rock and you were to apply it as a supplement with a natural fertilizer, it'll actually slow release nitrogen. I'm curious if you've seen that in other areas.
No, I haven't seen that, but it's the rock dust is being applied as a, you know, as a slow releasing fertilizer, organic fertilizer, and it mostly comes from, you know, crushed, you know, phosphorus or whatever. So that's, you know, that's the whole point of, if you have if you have rocks that are rich in minerals, then, you know, your soil will benefit. But it also all depends in how those minerals are those minerals available to the plants. Okay, so maybe, you know, if there is no water and there is no biological activity and there is no, you know, decomposition of that rock, maybe you know, maybe it won't be available to plants at all. Moisture plays a big role in the availability of those minerals, and, you know, the biology.
Yeah, if a person goes to a conference like Acres USA, and the exhibitors are going to be hundreds of them that will each have their own unique soil additive that will many times be from rock crushing and all kinds of sources, algae, others. But you know, and you're right, it can be everything from phosphorus to calcium, magnesium, micronutrients. But what was interesting about this rock at my place is that nobody else, at least, had talked about or heard about the source of that crushed rock being nitrogen, which is.
I didn't hear about it, so that's probably.
All right. Well, anybody other questions, you guys? Throw some in. Throw in some ones, or thanks if you really liked what William did here today. I'm sure he would appreciate that. So. A bunch of people giving you ones and saying thank you. If you've got any other questions, throw them in. Otherwise, William, what'd you say you're gonna focus on next time? Again, 2 weeks from now, remember, everybody. So.
It's going to be soil, vegetation, and then different, you know, recognizing different microclimates, different ecosystems or land systems, and you know, sectors. Actually, awesome. Kind of trying to summarize the findings and interpreting, you know, what interaction of all those things means.
Very cool. Well, it looks like they don't have any other questions. Lots of people saying thanks and saying good night or good day and so on. And we've got, remember everybody, we've got, I'm doing another webinar later today on microgreen fodder later if you want to come to that. Mark is going to be tomorrow evening about forest ecology. Evan Folds will be before him tomorrow. And then we'll also have 2 sessions on Thursday. So we still got a lot ahead of us this week if you want to come live or get replays. So William, thank you so much. And have fun doing your presentation that's recorded tomorrow for Amanda for her summit. And we'll look forward to a couple weeks from now. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Stop recording here right now.